fellow travelers, welcome to the 25th level of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Turford, and I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 elf ranger, Mr. Garret Blend. Garret, how are you doing on this lovely, lovely Sunday where apparently we're both like super hot right now thanks to the heating in our apartments?
Yes, the heating is blasting right now, and I have like 5 windows open in my apartment, but that's okay. We're wasting energy. That's fine. I am on my 3rd cup of coffee right now. Brian, I know. It's one of those days. It's one of those times, really.
Well, speaking of the time change happened today, with the day that we're recording this, although it's last week from when you're listening to this. So we're all messed up with the time, which would explain why Garrett's on his 3rd cup of coffee instead of his 2nd one.
Of course.
And
I'll be, on my 5th one, a few hours later. It's just a whole.
That's too much coffee, Garret. That's too much caffeine.
I'll get off of it soon.
Maybe. We'll see. Anyways, this, of course, is the RPG Cave where we talk about RPGs all the time. Listeners at home and viewers at home, if you would like to support the show, there's a number of ways to do that. Number one, you can subscribe to us on your podcast feed of choice, whether it's Apple Play, Google Podcasts, Spotify. We're on all the things, so check us out there, and we go live every single Saturday. In addition to that, if you want to see our beautiful faces every single Saturday morning, you can head on over to YouTube, youtube.com/YumiCapri. Of course, like, subscribe, share with all your friends, all that good stuff. Speaking of YouTube, Garret, we've hit a big milestone with the YouTube channel. We've officially hit 500 subscribers with the YouTube channel. After about a year of trying to get people to subscribe to the channel, because we basically had this giveaway for 12 months of Xbox Live Gold Game Pass Ultimate to give away. We were finally able to give it away this week because it was basically coinciding with the episode of the RPG Cave that we did last week about Shin Megami Tensei, which got a lot of people that were kind of new to the channel and kind of subscribing to the channel. Come on, with Extra Life that happened last weekend too. Like we saw some good numbers last weekend. So of course, huge thank you to everyone who's been supporting us over on YouTube, whether you've, checked out any of the videos, of course, subscribed to them, commented, all that stuff has really, really, really helped. And now we're officially on the road to 1,000. It officially begins here, the road to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So thank you to everyone for your support there. Also, speaking of support, if you want to get this show a little bit early as well as some exclusive content as well, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/YumiCapri. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar and out comes content. And then last but not least, Extra Life Game Day may be over because we're actually recording this the day after Extra Life's Game Day, but we're still fundraising for the rest of the year. And plus, a lot of the members of our team, Phoenix Overdrive, are actually still streaming and fundraising basically between now and the end of 2021. So, of course, if you're interested in donating, I've left all our donation links in the show notes, just like last week. So Sean, myself, as well as Kevin, Josh, and Nathan over at PSVG, we're all helping raise money for children's charities as well. So make sure to check us out there. Plus, I might actually have some RPG streams coming up, helping raise more money for Extra Life. So stay tuned for that. Maybe I'll talk about that on next week's show. All right, without further ado, let's read from the sacred texts because it's time to talk about one of the longest running RPG series on the show, combined with definitely the biggest one probably, and that is Pokémon. So Pokémon's been around forever. It has a bajillion games. In fact, we'll get into this. What fun facts, Garret, as we always do. So I don't have too many fun facts because I know we're going to talk a lot about the games themselves. But currently, at the time of the recording, Pokemon is actually the highest grossing media franchise of all time at $105 billion across all mediums, including films, games, merchandise, literally everything under the sun that they can sell with a Pokemon name on it. It goes towards that total. The competition up against Pokemon at around the same total is Hello Kitty at number 2, Winnie the Pooh at number 3, Mickey Mouse and Friends at number 4, and then Star Wars at number 5. And the crazy thing is, Garret, it's not even close. It's not even close because Hello Kitty is at 84 billion at this point. So like Pokemon's got a good like $25 billion lead on Hello Kitty, which is the next in line essentially. Which is just
that's really
crazy to think about. So obviously massive franchise that goes well beyond the scope of games. But we're going to obviously focus on the games with today's show. Speaking of games, there are currently 20 mainline entries in the Pokemon series. And if we were to include Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl releasing this Friday, it will actually be the 21st game in the core series. I'm actually including remakes in here because I feel like the remakes that they do to Pokemon are substantial enough to warrant them as new games. Kind of in the same way that I would consider Final Fantasy VII Remake a new game versus being the same as the last one.
It is, much more than the previous installment, whatever they did. They put a new engine into it and everything. So
well, they add so much more content to it as well.
Add a lot of content.
Yeah. So it's not even. It barely resembles the original game in a lot of ways. However, if I were to include all of the core release, and also the number I quoted as well doesn't include like red and yellow. I'm just combining red and yellow together, for example.
Oh, just all the gens. Okay.
Yeah, but then if I was to include all of the yearly versions, that number increases to 37. Including Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. But Garrett doesn't stop there because I didn't include any of the spin-offs in that number.
Yeah, there's
a
lot of spin-offs too.
It would actually probably surprise you to know there's actually more spin-offs at this point than the core games in the series at 39 spin-offs. So if we were to combine them all together, that number would reach 76 Pokemon games at this point, at the time of this recording. That's a lot of games since 1996, Garrett.
Yes.
It's that is quite a bit. So many games. So the very first Pokemon game that was released in Japan as Pocket Monsters Red and Green on February 27th, 1996, with Pocket Monsters Blue launching later that year on October 25th on Game Boy. So those were on the original Game Boy. And then the games were released 2 years later in North America as Pokemon Red and Blue on September 28th, 1998. So that release coincided with the show, the Pokemon show actually coming out in North America, being done by 4Kids Entertainment. Of course, the greatest of all studios. They did all kinds of interesting jobs with animes. But I mean, for the most part, that's kind of where I kind of wanted to leave it with fun facts, because I know we're going to get into a big discussion about Pokemon itself and talk about each of the games kind of individually, or just whatever games we feel like talking about. So I kind of wanted to leave it there, especially because like running down release dates for 76 games, Garrett, it's going to take us a while. That'd be the whole episode at that point. So
that's a whole wiki at that point.
Exactly. So let's start with our history with the series. Garrett, obviously, I know you've told your story before about how you got into Pokemon, but let's talk about how you got into it again, just in case people kind of missed our very first episode, because I think that's the last time we talked about this.
Yeah, sure. So that is the first RPG series I've ever gotten into is Pokemon. One of the first games I've gotten into. My first console was a Game Boy Color, and I got the Pokemon Yellow version. I forgot. I think I was like 5 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember getting it, and I couldn't understand it. I was so young, I couldn't understand. I couldn't even read it. But I knew the buttons interacted with the little person in the screen. And it got to the point where I got to the first gym, Brock, and I couldn't beat him because I just had Pikachu. I didn't understand what the other things were. And so I sent it to my dad, and my dad's like, here, you have to use this Pokemon in order to do this. And my mind was blown, Ryan. Yeah. From then on, obsessed with Pokemon. And so from Pokemon Yellow, I got Pokemon Red and Blue, beat both of them. I did all the cheats. I did everything in that game. And ever since then, I've at least gotten one game out of the gen. At least I've gotten all the games up until like the 5th gen. And then from there, I've just gotten just one game at a time.
Okay.
So I've played every single gen, except for I did not finish Pokemon Sword and Shield, because that was slightly disappointing to me. I prefer a lot of other games, other RPGs now. But I'm very excited for Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl to come back into the fold, and I will be obsessed with that game for sure.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, that's my history. I'm a huge fan of the series and the spinoffs. I love like Pokemon Coliseum, Stadium on the mainline consoles. I love Pokemon Pinball, the Pokemon trading card game, Pokemon Conquest. Like, man, I just love this franchise in general. So.
Yeah, it almost doesn't matter what kind of genre they really throw at it. Like it usually ends up being a fun time. It's sort of like Mario in that way as well, where like Mario works with like so many different genres besides platforming that even though he has like some misses, for the most part, you usually get a quality experience out of it. And I feel like Pokemon is a very similar way, especially with like weird stuff like Pokemon Conquest, which is like, if you were to tell me that concept, I was like, there's no way that'll ever work. And then it totally works, and it's totally awesome.
It really works.
So as for me,
what about you?
I'm actually not a huge Pokemon fan. I like Pokemon.
Okay.
But I haven't played all the games. In fact, not nearly as many of the games that you kind of rattled off, Garrett, because I actually got started late with Pokemon. So I had a Game Boy before Pokemon came out, but I was actually mostly playing Game Gear at the time. So I kind of had moved away from the Game Boy. So I wasn't playing too many games on it. Not only that, but I was just, that was the nature of also just me being older at that point, because when Pokemon, the first one, came out, I was 15. I was in high school at the time. So I wasn't playing too many games on Game Boy, or like I was really obsessed with the show, but for whatever reason, I just never went out and, rushed out to go pick up the game to go along with the show or anything like that. Like, I was quite content watching Pokemon every single weekend and really enjoying the show itself. And that's kind of how I got introduced to the series, was not through the games, but through the TV series. So I eventually played the game on emulator, because I did play games on emulator back then. I know. Just give me all your sad looks in the chat.
Oh, no. Don't worry. I've done my share part of emulation too. So no guilt towards you.
Definitely. I mean, nowadays I mostly only play games on emulators if they require a specific language translation patch that just isn't available. And then I usually have like a Japanese version of the game on my shelf. But so that's how I played Pokemon Blue for the first time, was the one that I played, and ended up catching all 150 Pokemon through the power of trading through emulators, which is always an interesting experience. But that was something you could do. So I remember being obsessed with it when I did play it, but then I'd actually put the series down beyond that. Like, I didn't really play any of the games until DS, when Pokemon Black and White came out. And that was actually when I kind of re-entered the series, because I picked up Pokemon Black and really enjoyed that game, but then it didn't win me over enough that it made me want to go buy the next Pokemon game when it came out, because I think the formula for Pokemon is one that I've personally never been into enough to want to play a new game in the series every year. I don't feel the same. Like, I don't feel that way about a lot of annual franchises as well, like sports games and stuff like that. Like, when I play like NHL, for example, one of my favorite sports games, favorite sports series, like, I only buy like a version of it like once every 3 or 4 years. So that's kind of how I feel about Pokemon. So I ended up picking up X and Y on 3DS and really liking it. And then the next one I played after that was Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. And then after that, I played, actually, I think that was the last one I played, was Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu. So, yeah, I mean, for the most part, I haven't played too many Pokemon games. It's a series that I'm not super familiar with the core series. But just like you, Garrett, I've played a lot of the spinoffs. In fact, I've definitely played much more of the spinoffs than the main games. And I'm going to save my talk about that when we get to the spinoff chat, because I definitely want to have like a dedicated section of this episode where we talk about spinoffs. But I wanted to bring in Seumas MacIsaac, at Famous Seumas, who actually sent us a question over on Twitter. And he asked the question, what Pokemon would be best for newcomers? So, of course, with a game with a series that has, 37 mainline games and 76 total games, Garrett, where does someone start with a franchise like Pokemon?
That's a good question. I think the older Pokemon games are pretty hard to get unless you're going to get Virtual Console, at least for the GBA and GPC type of games. I recommend right now, if it's not Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I think that one's going to be a pretty good one for newcomers. I hesitate. I think the other remake, it was Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire on 3DS, that's my favorite gen, the third gen, and that's a really good complete type of game, a good remake of it, and it also like introduces a lot of the third gen Pokemon, but also just the previous 2 gens. I think Pokemon. What bogs it down a lot is all the new Pokemon that just comes out every single gen, and it actually gets tiring for me too. So I suggest if you can get it, Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire on 3DS. But you can't really go wrong with like the other recent games, including Sword and Shield, because they're pretty easy to get into. They won't be punishing to you. You'll get the formula of Pokemon once you get into it. I personally don't care for Sword and Shield, but I know a lot of others did like it. And so I don't think it was a negative. I don't think there was so many bad things about it. It's just I was kind of tired of it. I was kind of tired of that pacing in that game.
Yeah, I've heard that game goes on like a really long time, like way too long. That's just the feedback I'd heard from a lot of other people.
The pacing's all over the place because I played like 3 hours of it, and I think I got like 5 or 6 gems. And I don't know how the pacing is for the rest of them, but I heard it's just all over the place with this game, especially the campaign part. I heard the campaign part is really short, but if you want to do all the other stuff, like the side stuff and the Dynamax raids or whatever, it could take a very, very long time to go through those. So
And to your point about the older games, like honestly, the best way if you wanted to experience like the older Pokemon games is if you have a 3DS to buy them from the Virtual Console. Like, because I think that's because they did do re-releases of like all of the Game Boy specific Pokemon games.
The first 2 gens. That's
so
correct.
I would say definitely check those out because those are like way cheaper than finding a cartridge. Plus, you run in and this is kind of a common problem with Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games now. If you want to buy them, is that there's a ton of counterfeits out there, and especially with Pokemon in particular, like those games get counterfeited all the time, and they'll fall apart within a couple months of owning them. So. I mean, I would not recommend picking up a Pokemon cartridge unless you feel you need to go down that route. But if you want to play the older games, I would definitely say 3DS is probably your best bet for a lot of those until they hopefully re-release them one day, ? We'll see.
Maybe.
But to your point as well, I think like any of the newer games, you're right, probably the best way to go. With Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, I know the 3DS cartridge for that is actually becoming much more expensive now too.
Oh,
but luckily, it's on the eShop.
It is on the eShop still, yes.
And yes, it's still the full price that it was that it released at. But you know what? It's cheaper than eBay. So
they don't get cheaper, man. They really don't.
Yeah.
I was trying to get Ultra Moon or Ultra Sun or whatever that is, and I price tagged that for years, and it just doesn't go down. I'm like, I just have to bite the bullet and grab it or something. So these prices don't go down. Just might as well just go for it if you want to play one of these games. Yeah,
the one thing I learned very, very quickly about Pokemon, like getting into it, especially from like a retro gamer's perspective, is just like they never, ever, ever get cheaper. So like buying it like on day one, surprisingly, is actually one of the better moves because it ends up being like the cheapest price you're probably going to get it for. So so I mean that's a good one, I would say, or even like. I would even argue that Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, I think, are good options as well, especially for like someone who's new to RPGs as well. I think those are much better as well because they're much more simple. And plus, I like the fact that they remove the random battles from it. So even then, you're not fighting a bajillion Zubats when you go through the caves. You're able to limit the number of Zubats you fight in there. So I do think the encounter rate is much better than going back to play like something like Red and Blue or something like that. So I would argue that might even be better than something like Sword and Shield if you've got a Switch and you want to play like a Switch specific Pokemon game, a mainline game. At least again, not assuming that you're going to jump into Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which is also a game I'm very excited about because I actually have the dual pack pre-ordered. So I'm actually very excited to play it on Friday and jump into those games as well. So that might also be a good place to start. But I think we'll be talking about that a little bit down the road. As we get our hands on that one. So Seumas, I guess we gave you a bunch of different options, but a lot of options I think is a good thing because with Pokemon, again, as we've talked about with many of the RPG series we talked about on the show, like the stories don't care over. And in fact, Pokemon, no one really cares about the story anyways. So
no, not much.
As far as like, there's some nice stuff with the story, but for the most part, it's like, it's always on a game by game thing anyways. So for the most part, you don't have to worry too much about that kind of getting in the way of things. So we're going to kind of skip over story since there's not really much to talk about story-wise, unless there's something from the stories that you want to talk about, Garrett. But for the most part, they're just throwaway. I mean, they exist.
Yeah, a lot of them are kind of just not that spectacular. But I think some stories to point out, the 4th and 5th gen stories, those were the highlights, I think, of the Pokemon series. Is Diamond and Pearl and Platinum. Those were great stories, and I think Black and White was a fantastic story as well. So other than that, just throw away the rest of the stories because it really doesn't matter.
Most of the time when I play Pokemon, I just pretend the story isn't there. Just usually I have a better time for it. And I'm just like, oh, okay, there's another band of bad guys that are kind of like Team Rocket, but are different in like subtle ways, kind of. But let's talk about the mechanics, of course, because that's what we're here to talk about, because we love talking about mechanics on this show.
Of course.
So obviously, Pokemon has always been, at least all the core series games have always been turn-based JRPGs, very, very generic, very simple turn-based JRPGs, I would say, where basically you capture Pokemon in the wild. And then as you capture them, they represent different elements, and it's very much about figuring out the weaknesses of certain Pokemon and then kind of exploiting it with the right with Pokemons of the right elements, essentially. That's kind of what a lot of it boils down to. You've also got evolutions as well for each Pokemon. So each Pokemon, for the most part, has an evolved state, so they can evolve as you kind of level them to a different Pokemon, a completely different one, and then so on and so forth as you play through the game. But there are some Pokemon that don't evolve at all, and they're just already in their final form, I guess. So that's kind of the way you look at it. And then other than that, some of them have random encounters, and some of them you run into the bushes and you find some Pokemon out in the open world. But it just depends on which gen you're kind of playing or which game you're playing as to how they go about doing that. But I would say most of the games have random battles as soon as you enter the bushes.
The older ones have random battles. I think starting with X and Y or Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, either one of them, they started not doing that. Or there was a weird mix in between where you go into a grassy area, it has random battles, but there's also a dark spot around that's actually like kind of a special rare Pokemon in that grass area. So yeah, they've done some mixing here around, but recent ones definitely not random battles anymore.
Yeah. Which I think is a move that's probably for the better, because like as someone who literally just marathoned a RPG from 1993 on stream over the last couple of days, and it was full of random battles, like where you would take 2 steps and you'd be in another battle. It's just like, I'm like, you know what? It's probably better that we're away from random battles with some of these games. So there's definitely that aspect. As far as catching the Pokemon, what's cool about it is that usually you can't just catch them right away. You usually have to fight them at least a little bit in the wild and kind of wear them down a bit before you can then throw them in your Pokeball and then kind of carry them around with you. You can, for the most part in each game, you can only use 6 Pokemon in your team at a time, I believe. And then you usually have like a Pokemon bank where you can store the rest of your Pokemon from there. And then kind of go back to the bank whenever you need to switch them out, which makes Pokemon battles against trainers in the game really interesting, because you'll either fight trainers on the open world or in gyms, and then you'll go into battles with them where they'll have like anywhere between 1 to 6 Pokemon themselves, and you battle it out that way. And then you've also got the gyms, because you're basically going from these gyms that exist in these towns to basically challenge the gym leader to then get a badge. And then as you collect all of the badges, you can then take on like the ultimate like grand championship, whatever it's called in Pokemon. It's usually called something different in each game as well. But then that's pretty much the baseline understanding of Pokemon itself. But did I miss anything, Garrett? What other mechanics can we expect in a Pokemon game?
You cover pretty much the baseline of it. I would say a little bit about the battle system or the Pokemon themselves, right? You got types, different types of Pokemon, like electric, bug, flying, whatever. They can have dual types, so it could be 1 type or 2 types. I don't think I've ever seen a 3 type. I hope they don't. And then the move sets are only 4 moves, and you have to replace 1 move if you want to get a new move in there, and they have types themselves as well, 1 type. And so it could be, and it really depends. Like you can have a Pokemon that's like, let's say, Ice and Ghost, and they could have like any moves. It really depends on the compatibility of that move with that Pokemon. And that Pokemon, they learn moves as they level up, and there's a point system with that level up system, but they can also be deliberately taught by technical moves or TMs. In the older games, there's these moves called HM or hidden moves, where you actually have to force your Pokemon to learn some of these hidden machines or hidden moves to clear obstacles, like going up a waterfall, cutting a tree. But that's not the case anymore. Even Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, they kind of work around that because in older games, it was kind of a slog forcing one. Normally what I would do is one Pokemon's going to have those hidden moves, and it's kind of like a throwaway Pokemon basically in your party to go through those obstacles. So so some of that also, it's been, I guess it's not recent anymore. It's been like for the past 5 or 6 years. They try to add new things into the battle, like new systems. Kind of like the first big thing was the Mega Evolutions in X and Y. They try to like associate a stone with a Pokemon, and it's hand selected. It's not like every Pokemon has one. It's like depending on which Pokemon you have, and you have to have the stone as well. So there's that. There was also the big moves. I forgot. It was in Sun and Moon. They had I forgot exactly what they were called, but they were special moves that the Pokemon could learn and do in battle. And then lastly, the biggest one, Sword and Shield, was the Dynamax. And I know it's Ryan's favorite mechanic.
It's the greatest of all time. It just makes your Pokemon super big, which of course you threw in a pun there, Garrett, because you said it's the biggest one.
It is the biggest one.
Literally, the size of your Pokemon is the biggest. So
your Pikachu becomes a big pillow puffball thing. And
why?
I was like, what?
Who thought that would be a cool idea?
I don't know what's going on at that point. So yeah, they've been trying to mess with the system a little bit, but definitely not like change the formula at all.
And I would say like they've always had like hit or miss results, because like with Mega Evolutions, like I loved the idea of Mega Evolutions, but what I didn't like about that system in practice was it really kind of pigeonholed you into like selecting specific Pokemon in your party that had access to them. Because as soon as you unlock the Mega Evolutions for some of the Pokemon, it's like, well, this is a default character in my party at this point going forward.
Yes.
Like Charizard, for example. Like even if you don't like Charizard, you're kind of forced to use it essentially. So it kind of took like some of the creativity I felt away from the player in kind of throwing specific characters in your party. I feel the same way about like card games that do that too, where there's like like a game like Magic the Gathering, where if there's a card that's like an auto include for your deck, it kind of takes some of the creativity away from building the deck yourself. So that's stuff like that I don't really love to see. But I think they've also added some good stuff as well. So I think that the new mechanics they try to add just are fine. I think some of them are good and some of them are bad. And I'm interested to see because I haven't looked too much into Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl and if they added anything to that. But I'm interested to see if they added anything to it and what's going to be different about it.
So they definitely are going back to their roots on Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl. They have not advertised any new battle move, which is good. I'm glad that they're doing that with that game. I think what they're advertising a lot is the side type of mechanics you're going to do that was in Diamond and Pearl, which is the mining, which is the beauty contest, which is the puffin making. And I think those little sprinkle in mini game mechanics actually does a lot more benefit than harm in the game itself. It's kind of like separate from the battle systems. It's like you're taking a break. You're doing other things to make your Pokemon be cooler or better or whatever, but not in the battle sense, but just like in like a fashion sense or trying to get new gyms or I really liked actually the 3rd gen mechanic as well of the shelters where you can actually open up a different shelter and you could decorate the whole thing. And I remember, man, the original 3rd gen Pokemon, I had to get like a certain bridge to like connect 2 hidden rooms together. And it's like, I put a lot of time into that too. So they do a pretty good job of these side mechanics other than the battle system.
No, exactly. Like I think that they do a much better job with the mechanics outside of battle, like that when they add to them versus the stuff that's in battle of themselves. Like because I think the formula already works pretty well as it is, like even going back to the Game Boy version. So I don't think they ever have to tweak too much of that. But it's like the quality of life stuff that they have outside of it combined with like all of the other new elements they introduce outside of battle, I think always usually serves the game a lot better. So, well, let's bring in Mike at BlazeKnight0923, who asked the question, do you prefer a Pokemon game that incorporates all previous Pokemon into the region like X and Y, or do you prefer a clean slate for all new Pokemon like Black and White? So one thing we didn't touch on as far as the mechanics go is that each Pokemon game takes place in a specific region, and that region has specific Pokemon that are usually tied to it. There's usually some crossover Pokemon that exist in multiple regions, but for the most part, usually you're dealing with a specific set of Pokemon for that region. So with X and Y, to Mike's point, they basically tried to bring all of the Pokemon into one game essentially, and then in one region essentially. So Garrett, do you like the idea of having like all of the Pokemon in one place, or having like a region specific Pokemon list? What do you think?
I do prefer the recycling of these Pokemon into new regions. I specifically like how what they're doing recently. Like I think Sun and Moon, it was about like half and half, like half like older Pokemon and half like brand new Pokemon, where the older Pokemon, some of them have specific forms of the Alolan form, and it's different types. And I think that kind of puts a little refresh to the Pokemon. There's so many gens of Pokemon now. Yeah. You cannot do a new gen of Pokemon, and they understand that. You have to put back some Pokemon back into these new gens, but you can sprinkle in new games here, new Pokemon here and there. I'm wondering when they're going to get to the point of not putting any new starters. I think that's one thing that we didn't mention, is that when you start the game, you have to pick one of the 3 starters. And these are either water, grass, or fire. And so in every gen, they have a new set of these Pokemon. And I'm wondering when that's going to stop, because I don't think they have... I wonder if they have enough imagination to keep it interesting with these Pokemon. But what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, actually, what you brought up with Sun and Moon is kind of like my ideal situation for a Pokemon game, where like I like the idea of there being like some familiarity with the Pokemon, but also having a nice batch of new Pokemon. But I can understand that they can't do that every time, to your point. Like, they're going to run out of ideas eventually, and they're going to become like The Simpsons, where they just, they don't, they're just going to run out of things to talk about. So it's just like, they can't obviously come up with new Pokemon ideas forever, especially with the amount of new Pokemon they do with every gen as well. Like, they usually do, at least for the most part, 75 to 100 new Pokemon with each gen. Yes. And with the number of Pokemon that exist kind of in like, I think it's over 1,000 at this point.
I think they just hit 1,000, or they're very close to it.
Right. So it's just like, when you have that many already, it's like, I don't know how many other, things you're going to be able to come up with. So I'm just interested to find out what they're able to do next. But yeah, it's especially like when I remember seeing for the first time when they came up with the garbage pail Pokemon, whose name I'm blanking on. I'm like, okay, the fact that they have like a garbage pail as a Pokemon is like, they've jumped the shark at that point, right?
They got chandeliers, they got ice cream cones. They'll personify any kind of object at this point to keep it interesting. So we'll see.
Yeah. So, I would definitely say like a mix of old and new is kind of like my preferred way. And again, like even if they did a game that was in a region before, like I like the idea of them like remixing the type of Pokemon that are there, like remixing the style of them to kind of match like what if it's in a different region but has the same list as somewhere else, like kind of having remixed versions of those Pokemon with like different looks or styles that are specific to that type of region, which is cool. Also, we didn't talk about the regions themselves, but what I like about them too is like they're all kind of based off like real world places that exist, but then like in the Pokemon style as well, and that kind of plays into the Pokemon that exists there as well, which I think is cool because it's kind of like real life.
Very cool.
And then one other question here from Canadian Kroller at Canadian Kroller on Twitter, who asked the question, what aspects of the Pokemon franchise would you like to see applied to other RPG franchises? Or what aspects would you like to see brought into Pokemon? So, Garrett, are there like specific Pokemon mechanics that you'd love to see in like other RPGs? What do you think about this question?
This is a good question. I had to think about this. What I like about Pokemon in general is the pacing of how I control my party. It could be any of sorts. You can catch Pokemon as you go and replace your party if you want, or you could prefer it how I do it, where I choose one Pokemon and it's like, you're going to be in my party. And once I decide that, I'm not changing really at all throughout the game. And that's just how I play these games. And so I don't really see that in I don't see monster catching games in general, other than like Shin Megami Tensei, which is its whole other thing.
Yeah,
right?
we talked about that a lot last week. Or Digimon as well, because we have those Digimon, like Digimon Cyber Sleuth and a bunch of other Digimon games lately. But even then, like the purpose of those games isn't really to capture a lot of monsters either. Like they just happen to be like monsters in it, but it's not really like the same type of monster catching that's in this game.
Yeah, there's a lot of turn-based RPGs that are central to like characters, central to like certain monsters, and I'm like, that's fine, but I would like to have control, agency over my party, and that's what I could do with Pokemon. So I would like to see that in other RPGs, or like give me a new I don't know, game or RPG franchise that can do that, because I don't see it that often. What other aspects that I should see brought into Pokemon is an interesting thing, because I think I don't know. It's a well-oiled machine. Like it's been going on for a long time. There's not a lot of things I would change about it. I think I would love a little bit more control on the difficulty. And that's just, it doesn't have to be like easy, normal, hard. That's not what I mean.
Right.
What I mean about that is like, give me a certain mode, give me a certain, maybe like health point type of like scale bar or attack point scale bar, whatever. Just a little bit more so the game can, I can define the game how I want to play it. Yeah. And they've been just trying to make it easier and easier and easier. And it's just getting a little stale for me after they make it like the easiest it's ever been. And I have to create my own rules in my own head to make it harder, like stripping out of experience share or something like that. But yeah, just a little bit more control over difficulty would be great. So what about you, Ryan?
That makes a lot of sense. So first of all, as far as aspects from other RPGs brought into Pokemon, honestly, when we touched on with kind of the battle system, I think the battle system without, messing with it too much, I think actually is a pretty good battle system. So I don't really think you could bring in a lot of stuff that way. Maybe I would love to see like a situation where like maybe the trainer is more involved, like a game like Ni no Kuni comes to mind when I talk about that. Because when we were talking about like what other games have monster catching, that's one that really came to my mind is like a really good one that basically
that is a good one.
Where like you cared about the trainer while also caring about the monsters you'd collect in a really good way. And I felt like part of that had to do with, the trainer being much more part of the battle itself, but also like it having a really rich story kind of outside of that. But obviously, as much as I want a good story from Pokemon, I know that it's probably never going to be kind of what I want it. So I'm not going to make that kind of the thing I'm asking for. But I would love to see maybe just more trainer agency as far as, aspects brought into Pokemon. I think that would be like really cool. Like maybe the trainer does more stuff in battle besides switching the Pokemon in and out. Like maybe there's something along to that they're doing that goes a long way. Or maybe them even participating in combat in some scenarios. I think that would be pretty cool. So,
well, you're about to get that game, Ryan. That is called Pokemon Arceus.
That's true. That's true.
It's gonna be interesting.
And I did think about that as I was saying it. I was like, oh yeah, they can kind of do that in that game. But I'm actually really curious to see how that's going to turn out, because that's a game I'm actually pretty excited about. But then as far as aspects from Pokemon brought into other games, like all in all, I just would love to see more monster catching games, because it's something we just don't get a lot of. Like we're very blessed to have Shin Megami Tensei coming out, and it'll actually be out. We'll be playing it by the time this episode's out. But
definitely
beyond that, like there's nothing else that usually really does.
You got Ni no Kuni, and you got some small indie monster catching games these days now too, right? You got Nexamon, which is a total Pokemon ripoff clone. And there's like Monster Rancher or something like that. So yeah, I would definitely love to see another JRPG type of studio. A Square Enix studio would be great to do a monster catching game.
That'd be so good. But then just imagine the ability brought into Pokemon where you can put a CD into your Nintendo Switch and then it generates a monster for you. Like how cool would that be?
That would be fantastic.
That's actually what we do in Monster Rancher, which is just funny. But yeah, so that's it for that question. But I think we've covered off most of the stuff from mechanics. Garrett, is there anything else from mechanics you think we need to cover off before we move on to spin-offs?
I think I need to mention the Pokemon fandom or the hardcore Pokemon fans that get into these games and what they do. It's a whole different ball game than what we're explaining right now. So Pokemon, they all have these stats, right? They have attack, defense, special defense, and speed. And so these can be optimized the best you can for a Pokemon depending on if you breed. So you could breed 2 Pokemon together and have an egg, and that egg can hatch and has some random number generator of these stats. Mm-hmm. And that's what these people are doing. They're trying to get the best stats that they can off of this egg hatching breeding type of thing. And then they become very competitive. And I think it's one of the earliest competitive gaming you could think of with Pokemon, and it's still going on, of course, these days, and Pokemon trading card.
Oh yeah, that's a whole other animal, yeah.
Right. There's also shiny Pokemon, which I think is becoming more common than it used to be. I remember shiny Pokemon in the 2nd gen when it was just starting out, which is just basically the same Pokemon, just a different kind of a film behind it or color scale.
Right.
I think some of them look really dope, and then others it's just what's the difference between them? And I know there's a lot of people out there now are getting a lot of shiny Pokemon just because of the recent game kind of made it easy to get a lot of shiny Pokemon. So yeah, other than that, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think they've gone more and more in the direction of making it way easier to get shiny Pokemon with each new release, I think. So I think that just makes them less special in a lot of ways, but it also helps because otherwise there might be a chance that you might play the entire game and not see one. So it kind of goes both ways.
I had my first encounter was a Venonat in the 2nd gen, and I did not know what the concept of shiny was. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to catch it, but I just ran out of balls, and so I was I'll just kill it. And then years later, when I was watching a video, I was oh, these are super, super rare. I should have caught that, but yeah. It was.
But you ran out of Pokeballs. How were you going to catch it at that point?
Turn it off and turn it back on. Oh, you could be a save scum hardcore in Pokemon as well. You could save right before you hit a legendary Pokemon and catch all you want. That's what I did all the time.
I mean, that's what speedrunners do with Pokemon. Because I don't know if you've watched Pokemon speedruns before, Garrett, but they're a thing of beauty sometimes.
I bet.
All kinds of crazy glitches or, again, save tricks and stuff like that. Everything in the books is thrown at it to play the game as quickly as possible, which is just amazing to watch. Because I love watching speedruns. So that's one of the things that I love about with Pokemon in particular. It's the Pokemon series is one of my favorite RPG series to watch speedruns of. So there you go.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But we should talk about some of the spin-offs, Garrett, because there's so many of them. So many that are good, but so many that are just real bad. So let's talk about some of our favorite spin-offs. So I'm going to start. I think one of my favorite Pokemon spin-offs, it's probably one of yours too, Garrett, is Pokemon Snap. I mean, I loved it on the N64. I haven't played new Pokemon Snap yet. So, I mean, that's one of those games where I was man, I really should wait for it to come down in price. And then I'm just fooling myself because I know it'll never come down in price.
Well, it went down to 40 USD at one point.
Not in Canada, though. I remember seeing that happen. That was a United States thing only. But that's one of those things where I would love to maybe pick that up at some point. But one of the things I like about Pokemon Snap, and for those that haven't played it before, it's a game where you take the control of a photographer who's actually tasked with going out and taking pictures of Pokemon. And what I like about it is basically it's like an on-rail shooter, essentially, where you're essentially shooting the Pokemon, but instead of killing them, you're taking their photos. And I actually really like on-rail shooters, like gun shooters and stuff like that. So that's why I actually like Pokemon Snap a lot. It was a game, though, that I didn't really play until much later because I think I told the story on the show before, but I didn't really have an N64 growing up. I would always go over to my friends' places and play N64, and none of them had Pokemon Snap. So it wasn't until I was dating this girl who had Pokemon Snap, and she's like, "Oh, you've never played this before? We have to play it." And then I kind of fell in love with the game ever since. So
Cool.
I think that's a game that I really like. But Garrett, look at the look on your face. I don't know how you feel about that game. How do you feel about Pokemon Snap?
I don't care about Pokemon Snap in general, and I think that bothers a lot of people. So I just keep saying it out of spite. But no, it's just, I've never grew up with the game. I remember my friend coming over with Pokemon Snap. And he was like, "Oh, let's play this together." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And then like the whole Friday afternoon, evening, he just played it.
Yeah.
Right in front of me. And I was like, "Okay, I'm learning all the secrets and I'm not playing at all. So I'm not having fun."
Yeah.
So I've never gotten into Pokemon Snap. I've tried the new Snap. I borrowed it from the library and it's like, yeah, that's Pokemon Snap. You take pictures of Pokemon and they get rated and that's fine. I don't find photography games really fun to me in general, but that's just me.
That makes sense.
It's a very solid game though, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying that you don't like something that other people like. It's totally cool. Garrett, what about you? What's one of your favorite spin-offs from Pokemon?
There's quite a bit. I like on the DS there was Pokemon Ranger and the sequel as well. So Pokemon Ranger is one where instead of a trainer, you're a ranger where you actually try to tame wild Pokemon. But instead of catching them with a ball, there's like a huge rope that you actually circle around on your touchscreen, and you have to wrap it around at least like multiple times in order to catch the Pokemon and tame them. And they had an interesting story to it, so that was one of my highlights. Another one, Pokemon Colosseum in Colosseum XD, Gale of Darkness on GameCube, and I can't believe I sold them off because I'm sure they're ridiculously expensive at this point.
They are. Gale of Darkness in particular is one of the most expensive GameCube games, and it's quickly approaching $500 complete.
Oh my goodness! I should have kept that one.
It's gonna probably cross that threshold sometime next year. So.
So it is very similar to the main core games as a turn-based RPG. The biggest difference is that there's these Pokemon that are dark, and you're supposed to purify them in a certain mechanic, and their stories are actually much better than the Pokemon franchise. And then Pokemon Conquest was a big one for me too. It's a strategy RPG, which I loved it. I loved it so, and I loved the theme behind it. It was feudal Japan type of area.
Well, it was a crossover with Nobunaga's Ambition, which was like a Japanese turn-based RPG series over in Japan. So it was like those games are more like the Romance of the Three Kingdoms games, if you've ever played those before.
Yes, I have.
But yeah, so that's more like what Nobunaga's Ambition's like. But that's cool. Like I also really like Pokemon Conquest as well. That's one of the ones that I really enjoyed on DS. Like I really enjoyed that game. And also, I think you mentioned it near the top of the show, but you didn't just mention it just now. But I wanted to bring up Pokemon card game. I think it's really fun.
Yeah.
At least the
trading card game is great. Yeah.
Yeah, on Game Boy. But also, have you played the new the PC version of the actual card game, Garrett?
I have not, no.
Oh, I played that a ton last year and really enjoyed it. Like that card game is actually surprisingly fun. But I'm also someone who likes card battling games like Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh. So
I love Yu-Gi-Oh. I just never got into the Pokemon trading card game, but I heard it's really good mechanics.
Well, yeah, that's usually why I played like the digital version, so I don't have to have like Pokemon cards all over my house, essentially. Because like it's like an exact one-to-one translation of the actual physical card game, just in digital form. And it's pretty awesome. So
and you've seen the recent kind of fad around Pokemon cards.
Yep.
It's kind of insane how people are poaching for card packs and opening them on stream and
but they're worth so much money. That's why they're doing that, because people are for some reason desperate to own all the Pokemon cards. It's ridiculous.
It's kind of it's fascinating to see it's happening to Pokemon and not nearly as much as like say Magic the Gathering or Yu-Gi-Oh or something like that. It's because it's
more of a supply thing actually, because with Pokemon the Pokemon company can only put out like so many packs of cards every year, especially with the apparently the rise of cardboard prices apparently have been going up ever since the pandemic started, and that actually plays a lot into them just not be able to get a lot of the supply, similar to what we talk about with the chip shortage for some of the consoles. And I know Wizard of the Coast was actually having a problem with this with Magic for a while. But they have less of a problem in North America because they're developed here, so they put most of the supply here. Whereas Pokemon is, that's all all those cards are made in Japan and then shipped over here, and they prioritize the Japanese market versus the North American market all the time. So I think there's just less supply here, and that's why you're seeing kind of this fad go out of control here with the cards.
I see. The last spin-off game I want to just point out that I think a lot of people know is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. Yeah. And that's been a long-running series of games as well. A lot of games
there, yeah.
I was surprised when I was looking in. I was like, dang, there must be like at least 6 like different types of these mystery dungeons, which is it's a Pokemon type of dungeon crawler type of game where, I remember the first game. It's like a person, it gets like the spirit gets into a Pokemon and you choose the Pokemon or whatever. And then you talk with other Pokemon and you have your own little story. I did not find it to be too interesting, but I know a lot other people really, really enjoyed the mechanics behind these games.
Yeah, I think those games in particular really remind me of like the Chocobo Dungeon series that Square Enix does, which is like a spin-off of the Final Fantasy series. I know a lot of people love those. The one thing I want to mention as well before we move away from spin-offs is there's also a lot of duds with the spin-offs as well. Ones that I don't know anyone wants to jump into, like Pokemon Sleep or Pokemon the Pokemon channel, which I think is probably one of the worst N64 games. I don't know if you've ever heard of this game, Garrett, but it's a game where you watch Pikachu watch television. So essentially, sometimes you'll have there's like 2 or 3 episodes of the TV show on there that Pikachu watches, but then he watches like a bunch of like really dumb like Pokemon like cooking shows and stuff like that, and they're like it's so bad.
It's so bizarre.
Or like something like Hey You Pikachu, where it uses like the N64 mic, which normally wouldn't be so bad. As far as the concept of the game, but because essentially you talk to Pikachu using the microphone and tell him to do stuff, but like the voice sensitivity of the microphone is terrible, so like it doesn't understand your commands half the time. So it just boils down to you being very frustrated with the game. So I wanted to give those a shout out too, because they're games I've played and they're rough as well.
That sounds rough. Sorry, the last game that caught in my mind, spinoff, Pokemon Puzzle League.
Yeah. Oh yes, I can't believe we didn't mention that.
Yeah, that's my favorite spinoff, I think, because it's basically, what is it, Tetris Attack mechanics, where you have to like group your colors and your pieces together, but you have to do it very fast in succession so you can get combos against your other opponent. That one is very, very fun. And I got very far into the N64 version.
That's what I really hope comes to the N64 expansion pack on Switch.
Me too.
That would be amazing online to play. Yes, I really enjoyed that game too. So
I'll totally fight you on that one.
Oh, geez, that would be we'll have to throw down. That would be a lot of fun. All right, and then as we move to final thoughts, we got 2 other questions, of course, and I haven't plugged this as well. So, folks at home, if you want to have your question read and answered on the show, there are a number of ways to do that. Number 1, we put up a question post on Twitter at Yumi Caprice every single Friday afternoon. We usually put the topic in there so you know what we're going to talk about. So you can leave your questions there. Or if you hit us up on Discord at the Yumi Capri Discord, it's free to join. The link is in the show notes. Just throw your question in the RPG Cave section. Tag one of us in it so we know it's for the show and we'll answer it here. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, just leave your question as a comment and we'll read it on the show. Just like, once again, Seumas MacIsaac at Famous Seumas asked us, and he actually asked us 2 different questions, but let's start with this first one. Garrett, what is your favorite Pokemon? Do you have a favorite Pokemon?
That's a very tough question, but there's only one thought in my mind. Favorite Pokemon? It's Blaziken. He's my boy. The fighting chicken, and he's just he's the best, man. Like when 3rd gen's my favorite gen, and when I had Blaziken, I feel like I could just take over all the gyms, and it was actually a water intensive generation, but Blaziken also had fighting moves which just totally destroyed other Pokemon. So yeah, and then Mega Blaziken, really cool that came out, in X and Y versions. So yeah, that's my favorite Pokemon.
Nice. As for me, I mean, I'm old school, so I'm gonna say Blastoise. And just Squirtle in general. Like I love like all the evolutions of Squirtle. I just think Squirtle's just an adorable character that's essentially just a turtle and a squirrel mixed together. I love the concept behind Squirtle. And then A lot of that has to do with too the Pokemon TV show and me just being nostalgic for that, and then the episode with the Squirtle Squad in particular, where like the evil Squirtles all banding together and they wear sunglasses. Oh man, that's such a good episode. But I would say Squirtle is probably my favorite. I mean, I have a kind of a bias towards like water and ice Pokemon. Like those are kind of like the elements that I really like. So I would have to say like Squirtle is probably my favorite. So I'm gonna go with that.
Shout out to some designs. Shiny Mega Gengar, really dope. It's white and it looks really cool. Ooh. And then also shiny Mega Gardevoir as well. Those two, I was like, the color schemes is like totally different and it looks super dope. So
nice. And then last question that Seumas has for us is that might as well ask a total 90s question. Which is better, Pokemon or Digimon? Garrett, what's better, Pokemon or Digimon?
Seumas, you know the answer to this. I
can't believe this is a question.
Why are you asking this question? This is a Pokemon episode. Of course, we're gonna pick Pokemon.
Yeah. Like,
I mean, Digimon. It gets a lot of flack. So or a lot of hate. So I don't want to like hate on it too much. And I love my fair share at Digimon. I thought it was cool too. But Pokemon, there's a reason why that's much more successful than Digimon.
For sure.
In general. So.
And like, I think the concept of Digimon isn't that bad. It's just, for me, I'm just not into Digimon because I talked about kind of what age group I fall into. Like, by the time Digimon came out, I was kind of over, you know, the Pokemon or Digimon style like TV shows, especially because like the American adaptations of Digimon are like so childish in a lot of ways that like
they're pretty childish.
It was very hard to get into as like a 16 or 17-year-old, right? So that's why I just never really grew up with like a fondness for something like Digimon, especially because at that point I had moved on to much more mature anime, like Dragon Ball or Neon Genesis Evangelion or Cowboy Bebop. So it's just like I had kind of moved on at that point to more mature stuff. So that's why I just never really got into Digimon, especially like even as an adult. I've just never really been excited to go and get into Digimon. But I know like a lot of people that like were at that right age group where they will defend Digimon to the death.
Apparently.
so I definitely know that that's a thing. So and there's definitely nothing wrong with that. I just know for me personally, I didn't fall into the right age group. But I feel like if I was born a couple years later, I might have had a bigger fondness for Digimon maybe than even Pokemon, but who knows?
Got it.
Who knows?
Shout out to the newest Digimon games. They're actually pretty good, and they are much different than the Pokemon games themselves. So shout out to them to not like, you know, you could tell they kind of ripped off in the Digimon anime days in the 90s, but now the games are totally different. The anime looks pretty different too. Yeah. So, you know, shout out to them to get their own identity separate from Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think they have very different feels to them, and I think that's a good thing. So there you go. Well, anyways, Garrett, that's going to wrap up the show. But before we go, Garrett, plugs go.
You can follow me at Blaine Explosion on Twitter, and you can also see me on the Nintendo Shack on Thursday nights over at twitch.tv/PSVG, part of the Play Some Video Game Podcast Network, and you can support them over at patreon.com/PSVG.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Yumi Capriz, on YouTube at youtube.com/Yumi Capri, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the 25th level of the RPG Cave, and we're out.
Bye-bye.
The RPG Cave's mana is fueled by patrons over at patreon.com/Yumi Capri. And I want to say thanks to each and every one of our Patreon supporters for all of your support throughout the years, as well as supporting our independent content. And let's start by thanking our premium producers, Dallas Ford, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, and Jonathan Brown. You can find his content over at youtube.com/PM Entertainment. Our platinum producers, Robbie Bobby Mailer and Trucker Sloth, and our gold members, Argo, Brendan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Emily O'Kelly, Heather Boney, James Johnson, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Benji Kong, Marcus O'Neill, RJ Kern, Dano, Skinny Matt, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, Foolish Fuji, and Xavier Reyes. Thank you all for all of your support,